Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about a service matter you need to take care of on a 2018 through 2023 Intense Tazer. This right here is my 2019 Intense Tazer, and on this bike I've removed the rear wheel here and I've removed the rear fender, and if you look right here on the bike, there's a grease fitting. And what I want to talk to you about today is the reason that grease fitting is on there and how you service the bike with that grease fitting. So let's get to it. Okay, before we get any further into using or how to service this, I want to just back up and explain a couple of things. First of all, just to ground us all, this is a sealed bearing, and this is what most pivot bearings look like on bikes. The bearing, this black area right around here, is a seal. And what that seal does is it retains the grease inside the bearing, and it prevents water and dirt from getting inside that bearing. Now, the seal's not perfect. Water will eventually get in there, and even dirt will get in there. But for the most part, though, these bearings are very well sealed. And on most full suspension bikes, these are the bearings. Now, this is an Intense Tazer. This is the lower link, the lower suspension link, and this is the upper suspension link on the Intense Tazer. On this upper suspension link, as you can see, there are bearings on this. And this bearing, the orange or the reddish area on there, is the seal. So these are sealed bearings here and here, and it has the same thing on the other side. Now when you look at the lower link on the Intense Tazer, the bearings up here in this part of the link are sealed bearings. As you can see, they're sealed on this, and when you look at the other side, these bearings are sealed. However, when you look at the main pivot bearing on the lower link, as you can see, it's silver all the way around that bearing. And when you look on the other side, it's also sealed. I mean, it's not sealed. There's no seal on this. Though these are greasable bearings. And what that means is that while the link is installed on the bike, if you have a way to push grease through this bearing, you can service the bearings and keep them greased without having to remove the links and replace the bearings. And on this particular unit, the way it sits in the bike is like this. Remember, I showed you at the beginning of this video the grease fitting, and this is the port for the grease fitting. So what would happen is a grease fitting would go here. You would push grease through the grease fitting, and it will come out. It'll go through the bearing, pushing the old dirty grease out, and will replace that grease with new grease. So that's the reason for the fitting on the bike, for the grease fitting. And by the way, that fitting is called a Zerk, Z-E-R-K fitting. Now, going back to the bike, I have cleaned up the fitting that's on the bike, and as you can see, that fitting has a little place in it, and there's a way that supposedly you can mash in and grease it. I've had very little luck using this fitting to grease the bike, and what I actually do is I remove the fitting and put a different fitting on it and then grease the bike. Now what I have here, this is a grease can which you fill with grease, And then presumably you can take this grease can and insert this tip into the Zerk fitting, which is on the bike, and then pump it right here and get grease into the lower link. I've had no luck doing that. What I've actually done is I will remove the Zerk fitting, and what I will replace it with is a 6mm by 1 metric grease fitting. And the grease fitting, I bought a package of grease fittings here. This is what the ones I bought. These have various sizes, but the size that fit the bike was a 6mm by 1. And then I will take this grease gun, which is filled with grease, and I'll explain what grease I use just in a minute. And we'll use this and attach it onto the bike and grease the greasable bearings. What I have here is an 8mm socket drive, and what I do is I place this right on the existing Zerk fitting, and it screws right off. No big deal here. Taking that one off. And then I take the one that the metric standard fitting, and just screw it right on there, and then I'll tighten it up. This is what it looks like after I've replaced the Zerk fitting with a standard metric grease fitting. Okay, at this point I take my grease gun and put it onto the to the grease fitting, and now I just simply pump the grease into the fitting. Now you'll see the grease actually come out on either side of the fitting here. See if I can show you there. As you can hopefully can see here, the grease has come out on either side of the fitting. So what I've actually done is I pushed out the old grease and have replaced it with new grease, and that's what you want to do. So at that point, the service is complete. All I need to do is just wipe off the excess grease and remove the grease fitting and put the Zerk fitting back on, and then the service has been done. I put this together to sort of summarize what I've found about the Zerk fitting. Basically, the manual recommends adding grease through the Zerk fitting every 500 miles or 1 month. But I don't do that. I do it when I do the lower fork service. I think that's adequate time for that. The manual doesn't tell you what type of grease to use, but in talking about grease, it says use of high-grade waterproof grease, and that's talking about the seat post, bottom bracket, and headset. But it mainly is focusing on grease that won't damage the carbon. And my experience has been that most people recommend synthetic greases, or greases which should be compatible with carbon frame. The bearings themselves, the greasable bearings, are EnduroMax 7902 greasable bearings, and the bearings come filled with Mobilux NG-Li2 synthetic grease. From my research, I believe you could use either Mobilux EP2 NLGI2 grease or Mobil Polyrex EM electric motor bearing grease blue. Both of these are synthetic, and they should be compatible with and not damage the carbon frame. Well, guys, that brings me to the end of this video on how to maintain the Zerk valve on your Tazer. Just one last thing, I do replace the metric valve back with the original Zerk fitting. The reason I do that is it just seems to stick out less far than the metric fitting, and I think it goes better when you reinstall the fender. But anyway, I hope I've given you something to think about here with regard to maintaining your bike or your Intense Tazer, and I'll see you guys at the top.